So first of all, we could look at the frauds which target us as individuals. Many people would call these scams or mass marketing type frauds, and they cover the phishing type emails we receive that seek to try and get our personal information and our banking information, through to romance scams and fake shopping websites that many people go to buy things which don't exist. So there are a huge number of those individual type frauds. Secondly, you've got a wide range of frauds that happen against organisations, often perpetrated by the staff through expense frauds, procurement frauds, those types of things, but also external bodies, organised crime groups, professional fraudsters targeting those types of companies, through to the final part of the equation, which would be the sort of public sector and the many different types of frauds that public sector organisations experience, from tax fraud, social security fraud, through to some of the same frauds that companies experience. So broadly, that's how I would divide the main types of fraud.
So many types, and obviously so expensive and so dangerous. How much money do you estimate is lost every year to fraudsters and to the people running these scams?
Well, we've done some research in the past which has sought to estimate the scale of fraud in the UK. And the last time we did this, which was 3 or 4 years ago, it was £190 billion. Significant sums of money that
£190 billion?
Yeah, £190 billion. And that's made up of the government, private sector organisations, and of course individuals.
So how, I suppose the $64 billion question, how can people avoid being a victim of fraud?
This is a very sort of complex thing to consider, but I would start with the very first and most important thing is to be suspicious, particularly in relation to any unsolicited contact you receive from individuals or people claiming to working for organisations and banks. Fraudsters thrive on impersonation, through emails, through phoning you up and telling you who they are, and often trick people into doing things they wouldn't otherwise do. So being suspicious and taking your time to consider those types of things, I think, is the primary defence for anyone. But obviously, some fraudsters are very sophisticated. They get hold of your information through data leaks, traded on the dark web. And there's not a lot you can do about that other than, if you do hear of data leaks and things like that, to regularly change passwords and, associated PIN numbers, etc., so that if you are hit by a third party type attack, you're in a kind of stronger position.
What about unreported fraud, Mark? Do you think there's a lot of that because people are basically too embarrassed to say that they have been the victim?
Yeah, I think there's a huge amount of unreported fraud. If we look at the crime survey statistics, which are the most accurate, they suggest around about 5 million people being a victim of a computer misuse-related offence or a fraud-related offence. And yet there's the numbers actually reported and recorded are in only the hundreds of thousands. So lots of people don't report frauds. Embarrassment is, I think, a key thing. Lots of people are very, reluctant to go to the police and reveal that, they've been deceived. High-powered individuals, people in, very professional positions, having to reveal that they've lost money in an investment fraud is quite embarrassing for them.
What are the fastest growing areas of fraud?
Well, in recent months, there's been a huge problem with text-based frauds, where fraudsters have been able to farm huge numbers of text messages and send those to large numbers of individuals. We've also seen during the pandemic pet scams. Lots of people have been keen to get a pet, give them company, and fraudsters have set up false websites selling pets, or people paying money for pets that they never receive. So these are just some of the many emerging different types of frauds that are regularly hitting our screens on our either through our laptops or our mobile phones.
So we know we have Interpol and we have Europol. These days, considering the extent of the high level of crime of fraud, should we have Fraudpol?
Well, I think there is a case for that. If we were starting from scratch and we had to design a system to deal with the problem of fraud, we would create an international body because of the amount of fraud that cuts across borders. And an international body would perhaps provide the focus. I mean, Interpol do some work, and as do Europol, but like many policing organizations at a national level, their focus is invariably upon the kind of higher rated crimes that they consider, things like terrorism, drug dealing, those types of things. So fraud often falls down their list of priorities, and having an international body purely dedicated to fraud deals with that issue. So I think an international body would be very welcome, but unfortunately a very difficult thing to achieve.